Good evening. I'm Jan Øberg. I happen to be born in Aarhus in the middle of the preceding century and then migrated to Sweden, where I've lived the last 50 years, and today I migrated back to my native country. Migration is fully possible, I can report to you. My background is the following. I'm a doctor in sociology. I spent my life as a peace, conflict, and future researcher. I have been a director of the Lund University Peace Research Institute until they closed it down. And then I was liberated to become a visiting professor in a number of countries around the world, which has been much more fun than being at one place all the time. And I have set up, together with my wife, a private research foundation, the Transnational Foundation for Peace and Future Research, the task of which has been the last 35 years to do what the UN Charter tells us to do and which all countries have signed under, Article 1 of the Charter, that peace shall be established by peaceful means. It's time we remember that. We're all criminals, including the Danish government, its prime ministers. Peace shall be established by peaceful means, period. So I spent my life, to a certain extent, apart from teaching and academic work, on working and trying to learn from people in war zones. All parts of wonderful former Yugoslavia, Georgia, Somalia, Somaliland, Burundi, Iraq before the war, about which I wrote a book called Predictable Fiasco. Anyone who was there in 2002 and 2003 could see where that project would end, including the creation of ISIS. Thank you, America. And then Syria, when Aleppo was liberated. Iran, where I work and teach. And now devoting most of my time to China and art photography having to do with the new Silk Roads. So I'm an academic, but I am one who has dared to put my feet out in the mud. And I've learned more from people I met around the world than I've learned from professors. Sorry about those who are professors here, but some of us have chosen to, balance a little bit more about the real world than the academic world. What did I learn in these places? Two things. Many things, but two things of relevance for tonight. One, these people around the world, particularly outside the Occident or the Western world, are almost like us. They want to live in peace. They want to have their basic needs satisfied. They want to have some social security. They want a good life for themselves and for their children. Anybody here who would not like that? Go to Iran, ask them what do you like, they will tell you the same. Go to China, that's what they've done the last 30 years. Done what nobody else in human history has done. Uplifted 500 million out of poverty. In 2 or 3 years from now, there's no more poor people in China. Study China, it's an interesting thing. The West is no longer interesting, it's falling apart. The second thing I learned, and that implies, the first thing implies there's no reason to hate these people. But the West has an obsession with hating, confronting, demonizing other people that we don't understand. Try to understand people and they could become your friends. But then you cannot have a big military. The second thing I learned was that no one flees for the sake of having fun. Ask yourself what would make you leave your home, your country, your place. The place you love, the place you've grown up, the place you've had your business or your profession exercised. It takes a hell of a lot of determination to leave your place in 20 minutes if you lived in eastern Aleppo under al-Nusra occupation. Nobody comes to Europe from these places without having a very strong motivation. And they want nothing more than to go home and rebuild what we and the terrorists we have supported have destroyed. It's a very important part of my life to have learned from people who are we supposed to dislike or hate or bomb, and find out that they're basically like you and me. Well, some are Muslims, some are Buddhists, some are this and that. If you meet them and if they come here or you go there, you can ask them, what does it mean to you to be a Muslim? What a fantastic thing that somebody would come to Denmark and teach us what it is to be somebody else. But what do we say in Denmark? They have to read all the things. They have to pass through tests to know everything about, films and movies and that type of stuff in Denmark. Did we ever ask, what is it we should learn to be able to integrate them and have a good multinational society? No, we didn't. We told them, you have to learn from us. We have to teach you. We don't have to learn anything from you. Point 3. What is the world that we're going to move into the next 10, 15, 20 years like? Because I think that the thought experiment here is something that is going to happen. And if it doesn't happen, we will be the illiterates of the world because we closed our societies. The world we're moving into is one, first of all, basically globalizing. We're moving towards a global society where there's only one unit worth any attention, that's humanity. The idea of borders, we have already heard it, is a bizarre idea. But the bad thing about the borders is not only that they separate people, friends from friends, families from families, but that the borders are in here. If we think borders are okay, it's because we think in terms of borders. We think of ourselves being different from the others, and from the others being somebody we should keep out rather than invite in. It's going to be a world in which we work in different places, educate ourselves in different cultures. It's a place where we live for a shorter time. We will move more, we will communicate globally. And it'll be fascinating because how boring is it if we always lived in Aarhus and only met people from Aarhus? I mean, could anything be more boring? I mean, it's not the reason I left, but I mean, I'm happy I did. And then come back and say, that's how it has changed the last 50 years. Interesting. It's going to be a world in which the 10-12% of humanity that happens to live in what we call the Western world, that is the United States, NATO, and EU, will be a periphery. We better prepare ourselves for a world in which the 88 or 85 other percentages of humanity are interesting, are somebody we are curious about to know and learn from and cooperate with. There is no future for those who think the basic relationship with other peoples is warfare, sanctions, threats, and demonization. The only future is unity and diversity. The idea that people in the rest of the world should be like the Westerners is a perverse idea. I don't know whether it comes from Christianity or what. It has nothing to do with people. You know why? They don't want it. They want the system they have, or they want to change it, but they don't want our way of thinking. Some do, some don't. If they can earn money from it, perhaps they do in a little elite in the third world or some of the developing countries. But basically, imagine what would happen if somebody came to our country and said, you should have Sharia law. Anybody here who would like Denmark to be run according to Sharia law? No, thank you, I suppose. This idea of mission civilisatrice, is a horrible idea that only the West has. The Chinese have no idea. They don't want anybody to be like Chinese. The Japanese the same. They wouldn't like anybody to try to be or Japanize or Sinophise their lives and live like that. They say, we're fine with being different. You don't have to be Confucians. You don't have to be Buddhist. You don't have to believe in Xi Jinping to work with us in Africa or Asia or something like that. And speaking about that future world's most important project about which you are not allowed to or not given an opportunity to learn is humanity's largest cooperative project of a totally civilian nature. It's called the Belt and Road Initiative. the new Silk Roads. It was started in 2013 by Xi Jinping, China, because they need it, of course, but also as an invitation to the rest of the world to participate in a horizontal cooperative structure with a philosophy of win-win, and if we cooperate, we reduce the risk of warfare. When we get to know each other, we reduce the risk of hatred. If we win something from, building bridges, roads, or whatever it is, together, we buy into something we have as a mutual treasure, and therefore we're not going to start, killing each other. We mostly kill people we don't know. And the moment you know people around the world, you say, no, don't do that. These are my friends, if you know them as your friends. So, this project is going to change the world, and we don't talk about it. I mean, sorry to say so, when an American politician farts, it'll be on the front page of all Western news. But when China has set up in 2013, and put $1,000 billion into it, and involving 80 countries around the world, we are not curious. Have you ever read one article about that in Aarhus Stiftstidende? No, you haven't. They hardly don't know where China is. Excuse me, China is an important player in the future of the world. So, those who believe in militarism, nationalism, racism or xenophobia, they will belong to a future history museum. Nobody will have to do with them. Nobody will cooperate with them. Because the future slogan is cooperate, win-win, and not only China, but anybody else. And if the West keeps on treating Russia, Iran, China, and others the way they do at the moment, they will all turn away. And they will leave the dollar. And that's the end of the US empire. The bad news is, the United States empire is going down. And it will be the last empire in human history, fortunately. Nobody is so stupid to try to dominate the whole world in the future, not even the Chinese. That's a project nobody's stupid enough to try on. This was the last. The only question is, how will it go down? Will it go down with a whimper or with a bang? A bang means a nuclear war, and that's the end of all of us. There is no Gorbachev in the Western world who could demolish the Soviet Union peacefully and suggest how Europe should be organized instead. We don't have that type of statesman in the West. This is dangerous. The good news is that when that empire has gone down with its 600 bases in 130 countries, with its CIA, with its warfare, with its indebtedness, with its bullying the world, with its embassies trying to tell Danes what they should do. When that is gone, the world will be a much better place, and the United States of America, the Republic, will be a much more beautiful place without that burden. And they will be loved again like they were before. So that's a good world that is coming up. It's a multipolar, cooperative world in which we learn to deal with our conflicts. There will always be conflicts. We have different goals, different cultures. Conflicts are wonderful. Violence is shit. We must learn to deal with our conflicts as cultures, individuals, countries, as long as they exist, etc., with much less violence. Violence against other human beings, violence against culture, violence against gender, violence against children, and violence against nature. The fundamental problem of the Western world that's also causing refugees to run away from the places we have destroyed is our acceptance of violence. Americans can go out and kill number 2 man in Iran. And the Danish Prime Minister has only one thing to say, I quote her, "I have no need to comment on American activities." That's when there's no law anymore, and that's when there are no more morals. That system is going down because other people are more decent and do not mass kill others. Where it will be in 20 years, I don't know. Maybe the Chinese become crazy colonialists, I don't know. At the moment, it's the most interesting thing to study under the sky. And so I'm reminded of what Gandhi said when a Western journalist came to him in his old days, shortly before he was killed in Birla House in Delhi. He got the question, what do you think about Western civilization? And then he played a little game and thinking for a long time, and then he looked up and smiled with his one tooth and said, I think that would be a good idea. I don't want to steal Gandhi's words, but that's what I would like to say. We've got to learn to be part of the world and not standing over it and bullying it. And that's Denmark's choice. Open up. You have a choice of either following the US empire in everything we do. That means sitting on board the Titanic. Or you decide to remain friends with the Western NATO and the US and all that. There's no reason we should be enemies of each other. But you just do something else too. You cooperate with those outside the Western world, because that's where the future will be dynamically created. We have a choice in Denmark and Scandinavia, I would include Sweden also, of saying, do we want to do what we've done the last 200 or 300 years, and particularly since 45, or do we want to cooperate with a new world, because there's a hell of a lot of dynamism in the rest of the world, and there's not doom and gloom everywhere, there's positive vision. Take a Danish newspaper and take the People's Daily and look at the difference in terms of positive and negative energy today. There's a vision out there, and there's no more vision in the Western world. If you ask a politician here, what do you like your country to be in 30 or 40 years from now, you won't get a meaningful answer. It's crisis management 24/7. So we have the possibility of recognizing that humanity is one. And we have no future unless we work with it. If we work against that, we will be losers. And so the last thing I should do is to quote another favorite of mine is Bernard Shaw, George Bernard Shaw. Some people look at the world as it is and ask, why? Now I put in, why so much war? Why so much environmental destruction? We've known for 70 years that we shouldn't do it. Why refugees? Stop these wars. Then you will have fewer refugees. Behind every refugee almost there's an arms trader. And then he says what we should do instead is look at the world as it could be and ask why not. That's exactly what the future is about, and that's why it's a wonderful question and opportunity to have been invited to discuss these things, because without ideas, without breaking out of what is called realistic, without looking into at least a future of 20 to 40 years ahead, we are not going to innovate and renovate and live a better life in the future. And we have a right to, and we should, but only together with everybody else. Thank you very much.